Being a property investor is simple, isn't it? Just buy a property, then sit back and collect the rents and fund your retirement. Oh, if it only was as simple as that. Granted, investing in property is a simple concept, but the execution is another story. I've often said property investment is simple, but it's not easy. And that's not a play on words. The rules are simple if you know them. The execution is more complicated. And that's what we discuss in today's episode of the Michael Yardney podcast. Initially, I'm going to give you 6 tips to help you get on top of the property ladder. Then I'm going to have a chat with my business partner, Brett Warren, about tips he would have liked to know when he first started investing. And he's also going to share a number of tips on success. And considering the success he's achieved, he's a good person to listen to. Then in the last segment of today's show, I'm going to share with you some money management tips, because money management is a critical part of growing your wealth. It starts from getting your savings, getting enough money set aside to get a deposit, then to managing your cash flow in the long term. So lots of tips today, but I hope they're going to help you shortcut your way to success. So welcome to today's episode of the Michael Yardney podcast.
Welcome to the Michael Yardney podcast, where twice each week you will learn a number of new ideas regarding success, property investment and money in around 30 minutes. Our show is brought to you by Metropole, who specialise in helping you grow, protect and pass on your wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. Now here's your host, Michael Yardney, Australia's most trusted property commentator who has once again been voted Australia's leading property investment advisor. That's the 5th time he's won a similar award in the last 7 years.
I keep saying it. We're living in interesting times, aren't we? And there are so many challenges, perceived challenges there ahead for us as property investors, as business people, as entrepreneurs, as investors. And today I want to give you some strategies to help you get up the property ladder despite all the challenges that are out there. Because it's important to remember that there are always going to be speed bumps on the road that are going to trip you up along the way. Things like the economic headwinds, the effects of the coronavirus, the stricter banking regulations, the looser banking regulations, competition from emotionally charged buyers when you go to auction. All sorts of things are going to get in the way. But it's important to remember it's not as much the outside world that is going to dictate your eventual success, but what happens inside you as a property investor. Because there's always going to be forces working against you, things of which you've got no control over. Politicians are going to keep making and changing policies. In the past, interest rates rise and fall, and at the moment they're probably not going to for a while yet, but the world is going to keep turning on you without much regard for what you want to do. It has no idea of what your personal plans are. So in order to navigate through the changes, the obstacles that are inevitably going to crop up, we need to prepare ourselves in advance to weather these difficulties. So let's have a look at 6 strategies that are going to help you reach your goals, irrespective of all the things that happen externally. Now, the first one, of course, is to invest in your knowledge before you even start investing in bricks and mortar. The best place to start investing has always been in yourself. However, with so much information out there, it's hard to know who to listen to. So I suggest you listen to people who've already achieved what you want to achieve. But more than that, ones who've actually maintained their wealth over a long period of time, not just during the last property cycle. Because you see, a rising tide lifts all ships, and the current challenges we're experiencing mean that very, very few people out there giving advice have got the perspective of having lived through things. Boy, I remember my first big downturn was in the 1980s. There was a recession. Bob Hawke was the Prime Minister at the time. I don't remember that much about it, but I got through that. And then there was the 1987 stock market crash where everyone thought the world was coming to an end. And I got through that. Then there was a property boom that built a lot of my wealth after that, and then there was a recession we had to have in the early 1990s, and that almost took me down because I was very highly leveraged and had a lot of commercial properties at the time, but I learned lessons from that. I survived that when, unfortunately, a few of my friends went bankrupt, and in the 90s we had challenges, in the 2000s we had problems. I could go on and on, all the things I've lived through, and many of my team at Metropole have. I guess the point I'm making is surround yourself not just with like-minded people, but get a mentor who will not only inspire and challenge you, but who's actually survived and lived through all these times so they can give you a level of perspective of what's going on. Now, the next strategy, as I'm going through these strategies to help put you on the top of the property ladder, despite all the challenges in the world, is to marry your investment plans with your investment capital. Look, there's little doubt that some investors have bitten off more than they could chew, and they're going to become a bit unstuck at the moment when there are challenges when either they lose their job or the tenant can't pay their rent. Yes, some people have overcommitted financially, but you've heard me say before, in general, the Australian property market's got a very, very low loan-to-value ratio because there's lots of people who don't have any loan against their home at all. So it's in the high 20%, all the properties in Australia and all the mortgages against them. So I'm not too worried about the Australian property market. But I guess what I'm saying is some people have overcommitted. They got excited. They had big dreams. Sure, it's exciting to have big dreams, but if the path to get you there is paved with gold that you simply can't afford, then your dreams run the risk of becoming dilemmas. Remember, all property booms end just like all property downturns pick up. So while enjoying the good times, you've always got to be financially prepared for the market as it changes. That's what's going to see you ride the cycles, because you've got to get through the cycles, the ups and downs, because in the long term, the property market will drive your wealth up, will help you grow your assets as long as you own the right properties. Now, the third strategy to get you up the top of the property ladder is to use your portfolio to reduce your risk. Strategic investors look forward to the best of times, but as I said, they protect their portfolio for the tough times because they know they're inevitably going to come. So one way is, rather than gearing to the max, they take a more prudent approach by building an emergency financial buffer to buy themselves time to ride through the ups and downs, as I explained, because smart investors don't buy themselves properties. Well, they do, but they buy themselves more than that. They buy themselves time. Sometimes it's in a line of credit or offset account, which they can call on should the unexpected occur, like loss of employment or prolonged illness or unforeseen repairs or tenants not paying. But another way that smart investors reduce their risk by having the right portfolio is by having the type of properties that are going to be in continuous strong demand by the widest demographic of owner-occupiers possible. So they only buy in the capital cities where there's more affluent people. They buy the sort of properties that are not investment stock, but investment grade, which are owner-occupier type properties, because these are the locations that are underpinned by multiple pillars of economic support. And so therefore the values don't fluctuate as much as other areas when times get tough. Another way you can get up the top of the property ladder is to do your due diligence before you do a deal. While the average investor goes out and buys a property emotionally, they find something they like and then they try and do all the research to make it work. Sophisticated investors, they've got an investment plan, a plan they can adhere to and carefully evaluate any potential investment opportunities in light of their long-term goals. They know that this makes their investment decisions less emotional and the results are more consistent and predictable. And that's why for the clients who join us at Metropole and engage our services to help them build their wealth, to be able to pass it on, they get direction, they get clarity, they get above average results because we always start off by putting a strategic plan together. We actually bring their future forward and plan what they want to be. We help them plan to become the person they plan to become so they don't make emotional decisions. By the way, if you'd like the team at Metropole to build a personalised strategic plan for you, then give us a call at 1300 Metropole or go to metropole.com.au. There'll be a link in the show notes. But I couldn't help mentioning that because those who are doing this are getting a good holistic team around them. Our team at Metropole aren't just buyer's agents. We don't just fulfill an order. We're more than property strategists. We take a holistic approach to help you grow your wealth by encompassing wealth advisory, financial planning, estate planning, the right ownership structures, finance, before you buy a property. So my point 4 was that you have to do all that before you do a deal. Now, the fifth way of getting to the top of the property ladder is to keep your sights set on your goals. While most investors buy a property and then they just hold it for the long term, strategic investors regularly review their investment portfolio's performance in light of their long-term goals. They understand that they should only own investment grade assets. But what they do is they evaluate how their assets are performing in terms of their long-term goals. That's why you've got to have that plan that I mentioned at the beginning. And then you really need to sit with somebody independent to evaluate how your properties are going. Now, why I say that is because when we sit with clients, they've got so much emotion invested in their property. Most of them have. They've spent time, they've spent trouble, they've spent effort, they've spent money getting their properties. They've got such biases to them that they sometimes can't see how poorly they're performing. So what you've really got to do is sit down with somebody independent and evaluate how you're performing. And sometimes you've got to sell secondary properties that are likely to languish in the long term. So I like to look at my property portfolio once a year, and I actually ask these questions. Is the property performing to my expectations? Is this property likely to outperform in the long term? If this property was for sale today, would I buy it? Now, that's a really important question. Knowing what you know today, would you buy that property again? And when we ask a lot of our clients, well, not ones we bought the property for, but they come in and they're looking to have a strategic property plan put together. They're wanting to see if their portfolio is going to get them to where they want to get to. And then we show them the numbers and figures and they're not going to. We ask them, if that property was for sale today again, would you buy it? And they say no. So sometimes you actually have to say, well, why are you still owning it? Does this property still fit in with your overall plan? Because over time you change, you grow, your skills improve and your circumstances change. So you should treat your property investments like a business. You should evaluate your assets dispassionately and you should take appropriate action. For example, the properties I own today are very different to the properties I first started buying. Now, interestingly, I still own the first property I bought, but I pulled down the old house and I built 2 townhouses, which is very much more appropriate accommodation today. So what I'm pointing out is have somebody put a strategy together for you and have somebody evaluate how your properties are performing. And that's really what part of the strategy is, because it actually puts numbers and figures to it and projects forwards to see what are you going to achieve, what's realistic, what's not. Again, my team at Metropole would love to help you with that, metropole.com.au. And the last lesson I'd like to share with you at this point is, remember that in real estate, less is often more. The person who wins in the end isn't the one with the most properties, and contrary to what you might believe, owning heaps of properties doesn't necessarily mean you're going to have financial freedom later in life. Concentrating on getting the best deals will get you to your investment goal, not the most deals. When it comes down to it, capital growth is the key to building wealth. You've heard me say that before. Yes, you need cash flow to stay in the game, but you need capital growth to get you out of the rat race. Because I don't know what the rules are going to be like when you retire. And I don't know, 10, 15 years' time, whether the government will allow negative gearing or it won't, whether you're going to pay capital gains tax or it won't, or what interest rates are going to be, whether you can use your super or you're going to keep it for longer. All I know is if you build an asset base between now and then, you're going to have choices. So sometime you may actually have to sell a property near the end. But my suggestion is along the way, avoid cheap or secondary properties, because your money's going to run out long before the deals do. So if you can only own 3 or 4 properties, you've got to own the best assets you can. So first of all, don't just accumulate properties, accumulate only good ones. And if you can't afford a good one, sometimes the right thing to do is nothing. I've made more money by saying no to deals than by saying yes to deals. So a moment ago I talked about getting rid of underperforming properties you own. I guess what I'm saying now is don't even get into the position, because you make your money when you buy a property, not by purchasing a cheap property, but by buying the right property. So there's always going to be cheap properties, secondary properties, vendors who are just trying to get out for whatever reason. So hopefully your investment journey is going to be a long one. However, this means you're likely to encounter some good economic times and some tough ones, some periods of low interest rates and eventually high interest rates, booms in the property market and slumps. So remember to prepare for the worst while hoping for the best. In other words, maximize your upside while at the same time covering your downside, and you're going to remain in control of your destiny. And if you'd like to have somebody hold your hand along the way, because all the smart investors I know have a team around them, and they're prepared to pay for their team, while the average investor gets his information for free on the internet. And you know what happens. If that's the case, you're the product, you're actually not the client. So if you'd like us to help you at Metropole, go to metropole.com.au or give us a call on 1300 Metropole. I think we can always learn from people who've already achieved success. So a short while ago, I caught up with my business partner, Brett Warren, National Director of Metropole Properties, and asked him to give some tips that he would have liked to know when he first started investing almost a couple of decades ago, as well as some tips on success, how he and others in his team have achieved success. So let's hear what he had to say when I asked him this question a short while ago. So, Brett, what's the number one lesson you would have liked to learn earlier in your investment career?
Yeah, the number one lesson I would like to have learnt was that location does 80% of the heavy lifting. I got caught up in all the hype, like most investors do, with looking for a hot spot or, a cash flow positive property to improve my short-term circumstances. But I really should have been focusing on the longer term and looking at the areas that grow in value faster, the known, proven and trusted areas. They're the areas that successful investors look for, and they're the areas that they buy in, and they look at growing their wealth and creating wealth by buying in these locations. And they're the kind of things that I would like to have learnt first off.
Sure. And what you did was what a lot of investors do first off, and look for maybe a bit of cash flow. Having said that, though, the location doesn't change and won't change. So while you can improve the property and you can change the property manager and you can renovate or redevelop, it's the location that won't change. And in Australia, it's clear, we've got statistics back at Metropole going back 30 years for almost every suburb in Australia, that it's some suburbs that have always outperformed and will continue to do so because of the demographics, the people that are in there, the people who can afford more. And it's not a judge of people, but it really has to do with the demographics of people being able to afford and prepared to pay more to live in those locations. And as our cities become bigger, that's going to become even more so. The distance you've got to go further out for cheap accommodation is going to be further and further away. So that's a great lesson to start with. Location does 80% of the heavy lifting. And then, of course, you can't just buy any property in that location. What's the next lesson that you would have liked to know a bit earlier on?
Probably the next lesson would be choosing capital growth over cash flow. A lot of people focus on that short-term injection, maybe $5,000 or $10,000 extra a year, but that's not really going to change your life, and it's not going to create a passive ongoing income over the longer term. So we all know that focusing on growing and widening your asset base over the longer term, that's going to be able to provide that income or provide that passive income later in life. So I guess, I lost a lot of time by looking at cash flow rather than investing in those well-located areas we just discussed before and focusing on widening my asset base.
Well, it's not unusual because lots of others have done that as well. So I believe there's 3 stages in your property investment journey. The first one is learning and educating yourself and putting a plan together. The next one is actually building your asset base, and then you can eventually get cash flow, but asset growth first. And you mentioned $5,000, $10,000 a year. Most properties won't even deliver that, even cash flow positive properties, and then you've got to pay tax on it. So if you do the spreadsheets as we do when we sit with our clients, when we sit with them and do a strategic property plan and map out the alternatives and show the numbers and figures, because most people never have gone to the trouble of sitting down and running those sort of spreadsheets to see, you'll find that the majority of what you own when you slow down, when you retire, isn't money you've saved. It's not rent that you've earned. It's not superannuation you put away. It's capital growth. And the reason that's the case is because it's in a tax-free environment, so you don't even have to pay tax on it, so the compounding works even better. And for most Australians, it's just their home because that's all they own. For those 3 million people who own an investment property, it's actually, if they own the right property, the capital growth of their investment property. 2 great lessons for investors. Brett, number 1, location does the heavy lifting. Number 2, smart property investors invest for capital growth. And somehow the two are pretty much related, aren't they? They sort of go hand in hand.
Definitely. Yeah, definitely. I think, absolutely.
Now, over the years, I've actually seen you grow as a person. You started off as a client of Metropole, then you became one of our buyer's agents, and over time, you became a property strategist and then a senior property strategist, and now a director and my business partner in Metropole in Brisbane. So let's ask some advice, some success advice. What are the tips you'd like to share about success?
Yeah, look, I always used to think that success would be a big occurrence or a big event, something really special. Maybe I'd win lotto or get a promotion or flip a property and make a substantial amount of money. But I've since learned that success comes from a series of small steps in the right direction. We watched a video the other day talking about improving yourself perhaps 1% per day. And that's really what success is, improving your mindset, expanding your knowledge, and all those types of things can really work hard to change your circumstances. And also your habits is one thing I've picked up as well, being more productive and working towards a longer-term goal that you're committed to.
That's a really good point. So success is a long-term journey, and along the way, as we've mentioned before, there's lots of little failures, and to be a success, you've also probably got to be a success at failing and just get up one more time than everybody else. And part of that also then is being able to delay gratification, understanding that you've actually, to be successful in the future, you've actually got to make some sacrifices in the short term. Second success tip, Brett, what would you like to share?
Something else I've only learnt recently, and obviously you've talked about a lot, is successful people have multiple streams of income. So in most cases, if you're earning $50,000 per annum or $500,000 per annum, your savings or your level of income is capped. And you can't save your way to wealth or success. So you need to expand your asset base. You need to generate multiple streams of income. And you can do that from property, shares and business. I've found it worked well with property, as obviously yourself, Michael. But if you're solely relying on your salary, it's a difficult path to wealth.
That makes good point. And in fact, most successful business people, entrepreneurs, investors recognise that. Now, that doesn't mean you've got to diversify widely. And in fact, in property and residential real estate, it's a bit hard to diversify initially because it's lumpy. But it's a really good way to start by having your own job and on the side having a property investment business, which will start off with just one property, and over time it'll build, and then you'll have multiple properties, and so multiple streams of income, multiple ways of protecting your financial future. 4 great lessons with property and success there. Thanks very much for your time, Brett.
Thanks, Michael. Good to be with you.
I'd like to share with you 7 money tips that could supercharge your finances. You see, the maths behind financial independence is incredibly simple. Yet most Australians never achieve financial freedom. And it's not for lack of knowledge. There are so many money blogs, podcasts, videos out there. Instead, what holds most Australians back is our mindset, our habits, our behaviours that rule our financial destiny. So let's look at 7 tips that could make you rich. The first one is the comment that if you're born poor, it's not your fault, but if you die poor, it's your mistake. Now, this quote's often attributed to Bill Gates, a self-made multi-billionaire who's obviously now helping the world through his philanthropic work. But what he's getting at is that you have to take responsibility for your financial future. You've got to become financially literate. The problem is that becoming wealthy is a long journey, and it's not easy, and most people don't have the stamina to last the journey. But then again, why should it be easy? If it were easy, the rewards wouldn't be so great, would they? The second lesson I want to share with you is don't follow the herd. You see, each of us is hardwired by evolution with a desire to be part of a herd. Look, it goes way back, doesn't it? In the early days of humanity, being part of a herd meant survival. With the herd, there was always somebody on guard for predators or danger, and also certain herd members identified opportunities that could be beneficial to the herd. However, that's not the way it works with money. Well, not unless you want to be average and follow the crowd of average folk. But if you want to achieve financial excellence, one of the best things you can do is not follow the herd. You need to break away from the pack. You need to take your own path. You need to make the best choices for you, for your family, for you as an individual. Successful investors know that to get on top of the property ladder, they need to overcome the fears that hold most people back. They need to stop those fears getting to them that stop the average person stepping on the first rung of the property ladder. They know that the average person waits for the perfect time, the perfect investment. It doesn't happen. Take action. They also understand the importance of, wait for it, going against the crowd. Remember what Warren Buffett said, be fearful when others are greedy and be greedy when others are fearful. The third lesson I'd like to share with you is you should know how many months you've got left in your wealth window. Your wealth window is the time from now until you stop receiving an earned income. Now have a think about it. How much are you going to earn in that time? Now, if you earn, $100,000 for the next 15 years, you will have $1.5 million passing through your hands. But the big question is, how much of this will you keep? Remember, you've got two important stages in your life. The saving and investment stage, that's what I'm calling your wealth window, and your spending stage, your retirement. For many Australians, their biggest asset is their income earning capacity over the rest of their wealth window. And your financial future will depend upon the balance between enjoying your money now and planning for then. Which leads to the fourth lesson. You've got to practice delayed gratification. If you want more money and freedom in life, you're going to have to practice delayed gratification. Successful people possess higher patience and an aptitude to postpone the enjoyment of their work. They've got the ability to work hard to accomplish a goal that's not going to be achieved for a long, long time. Learning to delay gratification rather than seeking immediate satisfaction is an essential part of success, particularly when it comes to things like investing, business, and making money. But it's not easy to change those ingrained habits that we've all had, the approaches to life that we've been practicing since a child. But once you're aware of the importance of the concept of delayed gratification, it is entirely doable. The problem is the average Australian focuses on survival, on instant gratification. They don't think beyond the moment. However, the very rich, they plan far into the future, often 5, 10, 15, 20 years. You see, the poor think about the moment. They can't wait for their pay at the end of the week. The middle class, well, they're hoping to make it through the month. And as I said, the rich are planning a year or two ahead into the future. But the multimillionaires, they're thinking a decade or two in the future. Remember, if it comes too quickly, chances are you're going to lose it again readily. All good things take time. Remember what Warren Buffett said. Wealth is the transfer of money from the impatient to the patient. The fifth lesson I'd like to share is don't ever think you can make money trading. Whether it's property, financial commodities, shares, trading is really a form of gambling. And the only people who seem to make money out of this are the trading educators or the bookmakers. But it's interesting how people with an ego bigger than their experience believe they can beat the odds. No, they can't. Instead, stick to the wealth creation strategies that have always worked, either investing in income-earning real estate, in a business, or in a share portfolio. The sixth, the second last lesson I'd like to share with you is avoid credit card debt. While credit cards can be useful at different stages of your life, and boy have I got a few, and I keep the frequent flyer points, my suggestion is don't use them to maintain an expensive lifestyle to impress other people that you barely know. Now, that's a huge financial mistake. Remember, the balance on your credit card isn't your money, it's the bank's, and they'll charge you for the privilege of using it. So while I do use credit cards judiciously, I have never, ever not paid off the complete balance straight away at the right time. The last lesson I'd like to share with you is insure yourself. Insure yourself against bad surprises, against cancer, a heart attack, a car accident, even death. I've found, though, most people only insure themselves as a consequence of some devastating news about a friend or a loved one. But if you think about it, if you don't insure yourself when you don't need it, you'll find yourself uninsurable when you do need it. So insure yourself and then hope your insurance is a total waste of money. So the bottom line of my lesson to you today is becoming financially fluent is the best gift you can give yourself. And getting sound, impartial financial advice along the way isn't a cost, it's an investment. It's interesting that all the wealthy people I know have got advisors in many areas of their life and they're happy to pay for their advisors. While the average Australian, where do they get their financial advice from? I don't know, from Facebook, from Twitter, from Instagram. So there are 7 money tips that could supercharge your financial future if you follow them. Well, lots of tips today to help you get on top of the property ladder, to understand about money, and some success and property tips from Brett Warren. And if you got benefit from today's show, I'd like you to do me a favour and tell somebody else about it. The more people that we can help become financially affluent, the better we're all going to be in Australia. So help me on my quest. Just tell somebody about the show. Use the share button on your podcast app or social media, whichever way you like. And if you really like the show, I'd love it if you left me a review on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, wherever you listen to this, 1 star, 5 star, whatever. I'm really happy that most of the reviews, actually almost all the reviews, are 5-star. That gives me the incentive to keep offering this sort of content to you. In between these twice weekly shows, you can catch up with me on social media. Just look for Michael Yardney, or, of course, I'd love to give you daily insights through my Property Update daily blog. Catch up with you again real soon. In the meantime, have a great week. Make it a great week.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favourite Android app as the Michael Yardney podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?